Hi everybody, welcome to a new, if slightly unexpected video, particularly for me. Obviously, like everyone in the Doctor Who world, you are thrilled and over the moon and over the planet Kemble with the return of these two episodes of the Dalek Master Plan. And one thing it inspired in me, besides thrills and excitement for the future even, was a desire to go a little bit further into the music of Dalek Master Plan compared to what I did with my recent Tristram Cary video, where I was really just focused on the Daleks soundtrack. Obviously, I touched a little bit on the soundtrack for DMP because a little bit of it ended up in Power of the Daleks and in the Moonbase. And so I was inspired to just dive in and I shan't be doing quite as thorough a job, but I thought it would be fun to go through and examine the various tracks that ended up in Dalek's Master Plan. And particularly now that we have the first 3 episodes in a row, we sure have a better idea of how this music was used. And like I did with my other videos, I'm going to be counting it up and showing you just how much music there was recorded and how much was actually used in the program. So, let's go. Actually, I almost forgot before we actually dive in. I found on social media a letter from Douglas Camfield to Tristram Cary, just the first page of Camfield's requirements for episode 1. And it's very interesting, and I'd love to get more of this documentation, but this is more just kind of a good time where I'll nerd out and talk about music. But I was very interested to read this letter, and in particular, it's going to talk about the very first track that we're hearing. So it says, I think the music should do several things. A, catch the horror of Stephen dying from fever. Catch the strange, archaic fatalism of Katerina. Catch the weirdness of the Dr. Katerina dialogue. Here are two people trying to communicate over a vast gulf of space and time. And D, initially it also needs to reflect the atmosphere of the episode title. And with that in mind, it is kind of interesting to listen to this music with some of those goals in mind and see how Cary did. Let's go right in, because track number 1, I will be using the commercial titles as on the CD Devil's Planets, released in 2003. This music is probably somewhere on YouTube, but it was much easier to find the Dalek soundtrack on YouTube. But anyway, let's see how the track A Strange Sickness sounds in the finished program. Lovely mix of instruments there, right? Some vibraphone in the background, a bit of pizzicato cello, flute. I think there's a muted horn in there. This flute melody is maybe a little bit of Katerina.
Yes, we need a special drug. I shall have to land somewhere. What's that? Oh, we're slowing down, my dear. We're going to land in a moment.
A little unusual in that not only does this music, as was stated in the letter, cover the opening titles, and that is extremely common over the Daleks Master Plan and really kind of all of 60s Doctor Who. But unusually, the music continues over the first 30, 45 seconds of dialogue. Actually, I've got the calculations here. The entire track is 44 seconds, and obviously the entire 44 seconds are used. So we only get about 10 seconds of music under the captions, and then we get the first 30 seconds or so of the dialogue. And we will see in future episodes, sometimes the music ends and then the action begins. So here the music has an unusual function to kind of carry on the drama of the introduction into the beginning of the scene there. And, well, how did Cary do? It's, as you see, quite a difficult job to translate words like this, ideas like this, into music, yet be supportive. And, well, apparently it was satisfactory to Camfield. Now, the second cue is actually about 6 or so minutes later than the first one. We've had the whole rest of the TARDIS scene, the first scene with Brett Vian and Kurt Gantry, and then we have the whole communication center on Earth scene with Mavic Chen being interviewed, and we don't get more music until Kurt Gantry pushes a gun in Brett Vian's chest and tells him to go. That's when we get the track called Kemble 1. And again, we're going to hear all 47 seconds of it in the program.
Get out. Get out of here or I'll kill you now.
A lot of crunchy intervals there. Definitely great creepiness and tension building there. I love the pizzicato cello there at the end, which fades out into nothing. Not long afterwards, we get the first of several stings in Daleks' master plan. And in fact, this was one sting that was reused one time, if memory serves. It's in episode 4 of the Moonbase. And this is the first time it's heard, and we're going to discover it is in fact the most popular track of Daleks' master plan. And that's that. Obviously, stings are just very short punches of music. And there's quite a sorry, Daleks. There's quite a few in this show, as there would be in any show of this type, as I've talked about in my videos. That's the first of several that we hear. Not all of them are musique concrète, as that one is. That's the first concrète track that we've had, made completely by electronics and tape manipulation. Obviously, there's a lot of that here, and that's what makes Daleks' Master Plan probably the most interesting soundtrack that Cary made for the program. It is a mix of acoustic and electronic music. And I'll talk more about that as it comes along.
I have my key to get myself in.
So the TARDIS has landed, and we're about to get another acoustic track called Kemble 2, and this is where the Doctor first spots a possible city, or perhaps a town.
A city. Or perhaps a town. I wonder where we are. I must say it's a strange place to put a city.
Keep absolutely still.
So for 4 tracks in a row, we've got the complete track used. This is a little unusual. Sometimes, tracks would be too long and therefore have to be faded out. That does happen in these episodes. Or a loop is sometimes made if a shorter track is desired to be longer. So far, we've had 4 cues, and all 4 of them have been heard to their entirety. But except for the sting, we've now heard 3 tracks that will never be heard again. They're just heard the one time in those particular scenes. Now the Doctor is going to stop to react to what will turn out to be the spar landing. And then we're going to get a scene with the Daleks with some musique concrète. It's called Daleks 1, and we're going to hear that a few times.
I must have answered.
Control reports. Space Vessel 111 in landing circuit. Is all prepared? Everything is ready.
It's quite an interesting contrast between the acoustic instruments. As strange sounds as they are making. I mean, the notes aren't exactly consonant. They're quite dissonant and prickly. There's definitely a lovely contrast between those and the electronic music, which is just plain weird and out of this world, and it works great particularly for the Daleks. We get this cue twice. It'll be another time a little bit later in this episode. In fact, it's going to lead up to a very famous Hartnell line. The longest version is in episode 2, which I'll talk about at that time. But here we get about 20 seconds. About half of the track is used for these scenes. And now the Doctor is headed towards the city. And this is the track Kemble 3. He discovers the skeleton. Once again, we get the entire track, 26 seconds worth of music here, which quite nicely covers the scene. Cary has his timings quite well done here. And now for this iconic scene, we're going to get 2 cues back to back. We're going to get Daleks 1 and Sting 1.
Space Vessel 111, touchdown completed. Excellent. I will await our guest here.
And here we go. Everybody now.
Daleks.
That's such a great sting. And there's one last cue in this story, and it's the scene for which we get our first cliffhanger.
Our new ally approaches.
From the shadows, the Doctor watches as Mavic Chen, who he's never seen before, arrives. This track, if I didn't say so before, is called Daleks 2.
As we welcome all allies of the Daleks.
I am honored to be here.
And the final scene of the true cliffhanger has no music. And so that's the end of episode 1. We get 8 different cues. We get one particular back-to-back set of cues, which I just talked about. The 7th cue, A and B, which culminates in Daleks. And we get just those. And quite a few of these are only heard here. We get the first 2. We get number 4, Kemble 2, and we get number 6. All of these are only used in episode 1. And as I mentioned, Sting 1 and Daleks 1 is going to be reused, as well as Daleks 2, and I'll talk more about that in episode 2. All right, let's carry on to episode 2, which we've had the luxury of being able to see for 20 plus years more than these new episodes. Day of Armageddon, and we'll see quite a lot of new material in this episode and a few repeats. So off we go. So once again, almost right from the off, we get a piece of music which accompanies the titles and writer credit, and it is a track, of course, called Daleks at the TARDIS. Yes, it does start with Sting 1, but this is a new track with that as the beginning, and the new conclette is added afterwards.
Inform base security.
We got about 17 seconds of it there, and we're going to hear it again, but not for a while. And I'll of course tell you when it happens again. And here as Chen sits in the council chamber and Zephon comes in, a track with his name attached accompanies this scene, and we actually get to hear the entirety of it, about 91 seconds, accompanies this scene in the beginning of their conversation. Again, more weird sounding stuff, but all acoustic as far as I can tell.
Armageddon of the solar system.
Yes?
I am Zephon.
I love those weird murmurings in the background. I don't know what they are. I don't think they're Conclat, but I suppose they could be.
The Daleks held a separate council at the same time.
And the theme almost sort of restarts again with that weird chord.
That is so.
And it ends with that final chord one more time. Another cool track, and we get to hear that multiple times. In fact, we're going to hear this 3 more times in episode 2. This music is found only in episode 2. We start off by hearing the whole thing, and we hear a few other versions later on.
But first we must,
Now here we're going to have 1 repeat and 1 new track. This is Daleks 1.
Guardian of the solar system.
One more time. We heard that in the first 2 Dalek scenes of episode 1. And at the end, we're going to hear a brand new Sting, Sting 2,
He, like the others, will be
as the Supreme Dalek
no power in this
is ready for his close-up, Mr. DeMille.
the Daleks.
Short and simple Sting there. Only a few seconds long. Yep, it's just 4 seconds. And we actually hear it only 1 time. Here we're going to get 2 versions of a track called Pyro Flames. And I think you can see why. This is the first one, which is, I call a hybrid. It's acoustic music, but it's been treated electronically. It bends at the end. That effect is much clearer in the second version, where you're just seeing the Daleks burning the jungle. So Pyro Flames is used twice exactly for those 2 scenes, and as you can tell, they're both heard to completion. I'm going to go find the other one.
Now will you shut up, sir?
Go get him, Bill. So here's the second version of Pyro Flames, and if you really listen at the end, you can hear the pitch bending. That's not the instruments doing that. That's the electronic tape manipulation. Cool.
I can smell smoke.
Here we go with a new track called Wall of Flame.
Yes, you're quite right, young man. They're going to trap us.
Doctor, it's like a wall of fire.
No. Not quite, my dear.
Listen to those weird cello chords in the back. They're really weird. You can't really hear it well through my microphone, but
The last place they would expect us to go.
we get 19 seconds of the 23-second track. So it fades out just at the end there. Nothing obviously too significant is lost, but it's not quite complete.
I feel like waiting. Yeah.
And as Chen returns to the council chamber and the other counselors assemble, we get the track Zephon one more time, which we heard complete upon Zephon's arrival. We're going to hear about 1 minute of the track. We're going to hear this 2 more times, all in scenes related to the council chamber.
It was expected.
And here's a track where Zephon gets into some bother. It's called At the City Walls. And it's going to fade out as Brett and the Doctor knock him out. We're going to get the complete track here. And bang, without much break, back into the track Zephon as we return to the chamber. And we get to see for ourselves the grotesque faces of the counselors.
Where is the master of Zephon?
He will be here. Eventually.
Search for him.
Here's a reprise of the track Daleks 2, the shorter of the two, actually. This is about 35 seconds. We get a little bit more in episode 1. Remember, this is the track where Mavic Chent was revealed to be on Kemble, collaborating with the Daleks.
Only the creature from Earth.
And one last iteration of the track Zephon, as Zephon is returned to the council chamber.
The master of the fifth galaxy has seen fit to
Although we get 4 versions of this track in episode 2, this is the only episode we ever hear this track.
You seem lost, Representative Zephon. All the plans made here could not succeed.
Now the introduction of a track obviously called Terranium.
Give you the core of the Time Destructor.
More weird conclette sounds. It's heard twice, it's going to be heard again in episode 3, and each time it's complete. One more track for episode 2, and that's when Zephon is going to raise the alarm. That's basically the name of the track. Zephon raises the alarm. And we get almost the full 40-second track here.
Tie them up.
He must come. He must come.
And the track basically gets cut off when he does so. And that's all the music for episode 2. We had 13 cues. And once again, several tracks heard to their completion. Zephon, Sting 2, Pyro Flames, At the City Walls, and Terranium. And most of the other tracks are, to a large part, complete. All right, that's episode 2. Let's get on to episode 3. Okay, on to episode 3, which has definitely become my favorite episode, basically because there's so many Daleks in it, and as has been said many times now, the direction is awesome, and the Daleks just look scary, and their choreography is beautiful. And so we'll take a look at the music that Cary wrote and that ended up in the program. So, cheers.
We won't. We're going without him. We're going into countdown.
Once again, music for the titles. A track called Leaving Kemble.
It's the light. It's the outer door. It's not fully shut. Quick, or we'll all be sucked out.
It fades out before we hear the whole of it. It's maybe about 5 seconds short of the 21 seconds total track.
Yes, it's rather violent acceleration, young man.
You probably wouldn't believe it, but that was music by Tristram Cary. It's part of a track called Acceleration, and obviously it's musique concrète. It's exactly the sort of thing that one would easily assume was made by Brian Hodgson, the Radiophonic Workshop, a sound effect. Well, Cary was capable of doing both, and as happened with the Daleks, some of his tracks end up sounding like effects rather than music. But that was technically music that you just heard as the spar hurtles away from Kemble.
The intruders must be caught alive.
And there's our friend Sting 1 for the third time. We get to hear that one. It was heard twice in episode 1, and here it is again in episode 3, and it is not remotely the last time we're going to hear that one. But there it is. Proved to be a very popular track indeed.
And Mavic Chen has given this to the Daleks to
So there's a second part to the track called acceleration, and this sometimes happens on commercial releases. Shorter or related tracks get lumped into a single track on the release, and I could be using the term cue versus track to clarify that, but there are two individual tracks that make up one commercial track called acceleration. We already heard the first bit that was with the spar takeoff. We're about to hear this as a sting when the Doctor says time destructor, and that segues into my favorite scene in the whole episode of Zephon getting his. And that sting makes up the other part of the track acceleration.
One of the most evil weapons ever devised. The time destructor.
Representative Zephon, you deny that your negligence caused the loss of the Terranium core.
You might also notice that after the initial sting, it sort of continues on, and that track resembles the track called Terranium. There may have been a little bit of recycling there.
You cannot do without me.
Excited for that new line. I'd never heard that before. The audio did not contain "You cannot do without me." Love that.
I will leave now.
And here's the track, Zephon's Demise. This is actually another hybrid track, manipulated acoustic instruments.
Execute! Where is the ship?
I love Mavic Chen in this episode. That casual look with his leg turned to the side there. Love it.
Stand by, randomizer.
And here's the proper track, Terranium, to end the scene. Or rather, the track that's properly called Terranium.
That is Terranium.
Yes.
The Daleks.
There's actually been a fair stretch now of no music since the end of that key scene. And now as they're about to land on Desperus, the track with that name is going to take over for a bit to introduce the prisoners and their situation. So it's faded out just over halfway through the track. The track is 46 seconds, and we get 26 seconds of that. And that's its only time. Actually, there's a fair number of tracks here that are only used once, and I'll tell you more about that in a bit.
What about the screamers? Shut up, put out that light.
There's one last track, and it is called The Screamers, and it is another hybrid type of track, as was Zephon's Demise. And that's actually the end of the music. We have another 5 minutes or so of Devil's Planet, and that's the end of the music. And so there we have it. We had 8 total tracks, total cues in episode 3. We had just 2 repeats. We went back to Sting 1 from episode 1, and we also heard Terranium from episode 2. And the others are all unique to episode 3, but unusually, none of those tracks we hear to completion. Well, at least unusually compared to the other 2 episodes. Many cues were heard right to the end, and that did not happen at all here, although most of the time, most of the music was used. The exception being the acceleration music that we heard uses only about 8 seconds, but the complete track is actually 37 seconds of that strange, high-pitched whining. Well, Cary always believed in over-providing, just to be sure, and well, that's good policy. All right, so that's the end of episode 3. We'll carry on to episode 4. Okay, onwards we go to episode 4, The Traitors. And lots more music to discuss here. Let's get right on with it. That spaceship noise is not Tristram Cary. And again, this music continues into the scene after the credits.
Next stop, Earth. Shame we had allies on Earth. Never mind. Who's in charge of this thing? Answer me! I am.
The music is actually still going. It's hard to hear.
Change course. Change it! Where to? Not Earth. Go to the planet Kimball. Kimball! Shut up and do as I say! Kimball's deserted, guys. As bad as
Isn't that amazing? Like, how did they time that? Was that just luck? Did they get to hear it before? The way that music crescendos as Kirkson speaks? Amazing.
No, I said go to Kimball! Kimball!
Destroy pursuit ship. They have failed in their mission.
Here comes a new Sting, Sting 3.
We will not tolerate mistakes.
We're changing course. Now release
It's mostly heard. It kind of fades out there. And by the way, Sting 3 is another track that was reused, whether Cary knew it or not, in the moon base.
Well, look up at the screen and you'll see.
Music comes in again from the beginning.
Open the door from the control panel. I'll rush it. The girl will be dead before the door can't open. Crazy. Gotta get Katrina out of there. Stop that! Turn the talk back on again!
You know, what's interesting about this that occurred to me is that the scene that they showed on Blue Peter, which exists, begins just as the music ends, and that was probably a deliberate choice, so that they didn't have to pay Cary anything for his music being reused.
Take it back to Kendall. It's one of the daughters of the gods.
And this, of course, is Requiem for Katerina. Another track that was reused in Power of the Daleks. And in fact, Requiem for Katerina is going to be reused in this story as well.
Nothing will be allowed to stand in the way of our plan to conquer the universe.
Sting 1, of course.
So that's our traitor.
Yes. Brett Vile.
Here's a track called Brett Vion, which we will hear one other time this episode.
Gained first rank 39.95, gained second rank 39.98.
Obviously, they are
You have a good memory.
Thank you, God.
putting him on the wanted
It looks
list.
like that.
Exactly like that.
Like Requiem for Katerina, Brett Vion is a musique concrète track.
You know you can trust me.
The drive force is very weak.
That was a short sting, which is contained in a track called Traitor. Like Acceleration, Traitor is a track that is actually made up of 4 separate individual cues, and that was just the first one. We're going to hear that again in the next 2 episodes, but it's obviously very short. It's just 7 seconds, and we're getting another chance to hear the track Brett Vion, this time without a lot of dialogue over it, and this is where Vion is stewing about the loss of the Terranium, and Carlton sort of comforts him.
Only because of the Terranium am I on the council.
And both times, by the way, if I didn't say it before, we hear the complete track.
Kingdom.
The second track contained within the one commercial track called Traitor is basically Sarah Kingdom's music, and we hear that when she's introduced. not that.
Come in, Kingdom, come in.
And as I said, there were 4 parts there. The second part is basically Sarah Kingdom's introduction.
A good security agent.
The third part of the track, Traitor, is another little 7-second sting.
Is one of the greatest weapons a politician has.
Mavic 10, the Daleks. I can't believe it.
How did you know about the train?
He told me! For heaven's sake! You must have heard him! You too! Traitor.
This is the final part of the track, Traitor, the longest part. It's 32 seconds. We get the whole thing.
Brainless idiot!
Pardon me, everyone. This is Jess from the future of the material I recorded several days ago. The final cue of episode 4 is Sting 3, which we've already heard, but this is complete. Both of them fade out, but this version fades out late enough that I'm willing to consider it complete. That's actually the last track of episode 4. We are yet to have Brett Vian confronted by Sarah and the Doctor and Steven run off, but none of that has any music. So episode 4 has 12 cues in it, and unlike episode 3, quite a few of them are heard to completion. The track Brett Vian, all 4 Traitor tracks are heard complete. And we had just one repeat of good old Sting 1 back from episode 1. And we're going to see some of these tracks reused in the future also. I'm going to leave it at that. I hope you've enjoyed this and maybe learned a little bit more about the music. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.